Manoj Joshi. I'm a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. I would like to welcome all of you for this discussion. It's actually been organized by my colleague Chaitanya Giri, who's from Mumbai. So basically, commercial space technologies can be leveraged in hybrid warfare, so which blends irregular cyber informational tactics to achieve strategic goals while often staying below the threshold of open conflict. Meaning that's what we are really looking at, because open conflict, militarization of space warfare is a completely different subject. We are looking at how these kind of commercial technologies can be leveraged in hybrid warfare. These technologies, primarily developed for civilian purposes, can be repurposed or exploited due to their accessibility, affordability, and dual use potential. Now, what are these technologies? Satellite communication, that's the obvious one, which can be used for internet, voice, and data connectivity. Number two is the Earth observation satellites, which can be commercially purchased for surveillance, reconnaissance. Images can be even manipulated for disinformation. PNT, position navigation timing services, often augment GPS data and can be used for precision attacks, spoofing, and jamming, which we are hearing a bit of with regard to Myanmar, and as well as some spoofing going on in the Ukraine area. Number four is small satellites, CubeSats, which can be used for espionage and signal interception and kinetic tools to ram other satellites. So they can be satellites which can be seen as service satellites, but which can actually have a different potential to harm the other satellites. Number five, space-based Internet of Things and cloud services for tracking targets and cyber operations. And number six, counter space technology satellites interference, ostensibly for servicing and for debris removal, but they can be misused for harming active satellites. Now, commercial space technologies are a force multiplier in hybrid warfare, offering both opportunities and risks. Their dual-use nature demands vigilance, as the same tools that drive innovation can destabilize when they are wielded with intent. States and companies must balance openness with security, ensuring these technologies don't become weapons against the very systems that they support. Today, two of our speakers will speak on hybrid wars and how space-based assets have been used by suspicious players. Dr. Sinha will focus on conflicts in Eastern Europe and Ukraine and how space-based systems have been slyly exploited. Tejas Bharadwaj will speak on space tech aspects and how secure they have been in usage. Professor Jegannathan will focus on terrorism in Kashmir and how such assets have been used. And Chaitanya Giri will talk about some recent developments in Kazakhstan, how China is playing the game of supporting its proxies with its space assets. So I'll straight away start this, and I need to tell you, I'm no special expert in this particular area. I'm a distinguished fellow here. I specialize in security issues, but space is something which I look at from the point of view of security. But what we have is a panel of experts who will tell us a little bit more about this. So, Dr. Sinha.
A very good afternoon, everyone. Since I am beginning the panel discussion, I would like to just give a brief introduction on hybrid wars. So what I'm focusing basically today is the age of hybrid wars and the use of access to technology by non-state actors and how they have innovatively done that in the Russia-Ukraine theater. So just to give a very brief introduction on hybrid wars and what gray zone conflicts really are, we know that we are living in an era where traditional security is not just traditional, and wars are not always declared, and borders are not always physically crossed, and the enemy is not always in the uniform either. There is a very thin line between war and peace now, civilian and combat zone, as well as truth and propaganda and black and white. And that is where the gray zone comes in. So talking about hybrid wars, we are talking basically where conventional military operations are blending and integrating with irregular and unconventional tactics. Right. So, talking about gray zones, what is really happening in these gray zones? In these gray zones, there are state actors who are pursuing their strategic objectives, in some cases without any outright war itself. And then there are these non state actors who have access to cutting edge technology, and they also have state support, and they are the ones who are the main key players in this kind of domain. So in hybrid warfare, we see the battlefield is not just geographic or military, it is cyber, economic, information spaces, etc. Now we all know that hybrid warfare is again not anything new. We've been hearing about it for so many years. But the fact is that day by day and year by year, there have been so many technical advancements that now hybrid warfare has transformed into a completely new era of warfare. The reach and impact and the outcome of the warfare is completely transformed because of the advancement of technology and also the ease of accessibility to technology. So in addition to integration of these different domains, cyber, economic, military, etc., there are some other elements of hybrid warfare which are very important to understand before we go into what is really happening in the Russia-Ukraine region. Firstly, deniability. Because state actors are acting completely anonymously through their non-state actors and proxies, so it is very easy for them to avoid responsibility. Secondly, exploitation of vulnerabilities. Because hybrid warfare is all about attacking the most vulnerable aspects of the state, be it power grids through cyber attacks, or be it public opinion through misinformation or disinformation campaigns. Thirdly, temporal and spatial ambiguity. What we mean by that is that hybrid warfare is not limited to a specific time period, and neither is it limited to a specific geographical location either. It is non-linear, it is fragmented, it is unpredictable, and it is flaring up at different points of time at different locations. And because of that, the fact that it is so hard to define, the government response to it is also very difficult to formulate. And lastly, another important element is psychological warfare, because the main aspect of hybrid warfare is to confuse, demoralize, and divide societies, which basically leads to collapse of societies. And how that is happening is again through cyber attacks, through disinformation campaigns, fake news, deep fakes, fabricated information, etc. So what is really setting hybrid warfare apart is the fact that non-traditional tools are being used to pursue very much traditional and geopolitical goals. So coming to the case of Russia-Ukraine, I think in the 21st century, the whole Russia-Ukraine region has been quite the epicenter of hybrid warfare, because it starts right from Russia's intervention in 2014. When Russia intervened in Eastern Europe, Eastern Ukraine and Crimea, it was not just about territory, it was about showing a new kind of warfare, because they used a lot of mixed tactics, right? These mixed tactics were information warfare, propaganda, because they were trying to delegitimize the Ukrainian government in favor of the pro-Russian separatist minorities. Secondly, coordinated cyber attacks, which were perpetuated by independent but again Kremlin assimilated groups. And thirdly, the use of irregular forces. If you guys would know, in 2014, the whole attack which began was through a group of unmarked soldiers called the Little Green Men. And they took over the Ukrainian strategic locations like military bases and airports. And then this was again backed by a lot of cyber onslaught and information propaganda. Then even from the period from 2014 to 2021, there were a number of cyber attacks on the Ukrainian power grid systems. And then in February 2022, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion, in addition to alongside hot war, there were still a lot of hybrid tactics which remained intact, like the cyber attacks on the satellite communication networks, on financial networks, on information systems. And there was also the use of private military companies, PMCs, in 2014 as well as 2022, who were supporting the state actors in terms of logistical support or intelligence gathering, force protection, etc. So basically what we are understanding is that the access of technology to non-state actors is forming the key element of hybrid warfare. And I think cyber domain is the main area where the Russia-Ukraine hybrid tactics are more prevalent, because the use of electronic warfare capabilities or disrupting systems, electronic systems like the GPS systems, they have been very much prevalent. Then they have also used IT armies and cyber militias to hack into the Ukrainian government websites, banks. And this has not only led to leaking sensitive information, but also in completely disrupting a lot of communication channels. So there are two examples in this aspect. Firstly, in 2015, Russia had used the black energy malware to launch a coordinated cyber attack on the energy and power companies of Ukraine. And this was not just a digital intrusion, but this was a complete attack on the civilian infrastructure of Ukraine. And in my opinion, this was one of the most turning points in the history of cyber warfare. Because the attack was multi-layered. What they did was they sent spear phishing emails through which they infiltrated into the IT systems of the energy companies. And then they launched their black energy malware through which they could get remote access to espionage as well as destruction. And then, after many months of surveillance, they completely attacked their supervisory and data acquisition control system, through which they could completely shut down the substations of the power system. And alongside, the telephone and telecommunication channels were also completely jammed. So there was not just a blackout, but the customer service to access these channels was also completely disabled. So that was also a form of psychological warfare where you're unable to communicate in a space of a complete blackout. Similarly, in 2022, just a few hours before Russia launched their full-scale invasion on Ukraine, there was a cyber attack targeted by the KA-SAT satellite network, which is operated by Viasat. This attack focused on disrupting the satellite modems and exploiting a misconfigured VPN appliance to gain access to the internal systems. Now, again, through this, they were able to disable the broadband system which provided internet not just to Ukraine but across Eastern Europe. So the purpose of this was that in addition to missile, air and ground assault, they would launch this kind of a cyber attack on their broadband system so that not just Ukrainian military coordination is disabled, but their command control also cannot coordinate with each other. It also delayed and weakened any kind of responses from the NATO countries and European countries. And at the same time, it created a lot of confusion between the civilians and the military. So again, this was a form of psychological warfare again. Another very important game-changing tool, like we all know in cyber warfare and specifically in the Russia-Ukraine region, has been the use of drones. Because there are a number of off-the-shelf drones which are so easily accessible, like DJI quadcopters, racing drones, even modified agricultural drones. They have been used by both the actors for targeting as well as tactical skills. In fact, Ukraine has mobilized civilian tech sectors and volunteer networks to deploy commercial drones. And they have an initiative called Army of Drones, which is crowdsourced, crowdfunded, and deployed by civilians and non-state actors. And this commercial drone technology is also very accessible in terms of using open source intelligence to target the military sites or the logistical sites or wherever weapon storage sites are there. And through this, they are able to track troop movements through any kind of geotagged content. So, in fact, if we see that Russia and Ukraine, the war, it is now entering its 4th year. And there was a recent report last month which said that 70% of the casualties on both the sides have actually been because of drone strikes. So it's not just Russia or just Ukraine, but both the actors have been involved in a drone arms race. Both of them are using anti-drone jamming techniques. They are using AI-based targeting. And what is most important about understanding this drone technology is not just the military impact aspect, but the social and psychological aspect of a drone. The fact that it has become a weapon of the non-state actor, it is so cheap and easily accessible. And that is the whole point of hybrid warfare. The fact that it is asymmetric, it is accessible, and it is deeply psychological. And at the same time, with the use of drone technology, Ukraine has also been in some way able to equalize Russian traditional forces because they cannot spend as much as Russia in terms of their military. But with the use of drones, they have been somewhat able to equalize that. Now, in addition to cyber attacks, there are a lot of misinformation and disinformation campaigns also which have happened across both the actors, Russia as well as Ukraine, because there is a lot of psychologically and ideologically motivated material which has gone around, and that has led to the creation of a narrative on both the sides, which has also impacted the war. And I think this gray zone conflict in terms of cyber attacks extends beyond Ukraine as well. because there have been so many instances in the last 3 years where there have been reported attempts by Russia to sabotage the undersea cables in the Baltic Sea, right, by Estonia and Latvia, Lithuania. These countries have reported a number of times that their undersea optic fiber cables are being disrupted by suspected Russian cyber attacks. And this becomes extremely problematic because these are literally the arteries of global internet. Almost 95% of internet transmission is happening through these undersea optic fiber cables. So in addition to the cyber domain, then economic warfare is also a very important part of hybrid warfare, which Russia and Ukraine both have used, especially in terms of Russian response to the Western sanctions. In terms of tech-enabled energy warfare, Russia has used it in terms of putting economic pressure on Europe because, for example, they have Gazprom and they have a digital command and a remote-controlled command over the gas pipeline management systems. And through that, they have been able to disrupt precisely and very timely Nord Stream 1, and that has created a lot of economic pressure on Europe, especially Germany and most of the countries in Europe. Secondly, in terms of sanctions, again, Russia has also partnered with a number of fintech non-state actors to be able to blunt the economic pressure of sanctions and also in favor of defending the ruble. And at the same time, they have also used a lot of memes, media, artificial intelligence, chatbots to be able to create grassroots anger against Western sanctions, again, controlling the narrative amongst the civilians and the public. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is that Russia-Ukraine is quite the epicenter of hybrid warfare, and it has been evident in more than the past decade, a little more than that. And it is not just an emerging mode of conflict anymore, it is the defining mode of conflict. And we see that because of its asymmetry, because of its deeply psychological nature, all these non-state actors have been acting in completely legally as well as ethically gray zones. So there are a few lessons which can be learned from this whole Russia-Ukraine hybrid warfare. Firstly, that security is multidimensional, and traditional security is not just traditional anymore, and just military preparedness is not going to be enough. It has to be coupled with cyber resilience, with information literacy, with economic defense capabilities. Secondly, technology is an equalizer because through cheap accessibility to drones and open source intelligence, the balance of power can shift. Whoever has the edge in cyberspace can control the narrative and can control the perception about what is happening on ground. And thirdly, the fact that narratives are very much significant and very much important because now battles are being fought not just on the ground, but the battle for legitimacy is being fought in minds of the people as well. And what Russia and Ukraine, both these actors have done is that through the use of these technological tools, they both are trying to create a narrative of themselves being the defender and the other being the aggressor in the global narrative. So to conclude, I would just like to say that for India, I think this is a very loud wake-up call to understand from other theaters and other kind of conflicts which are happening across the globe. Because we as Indians, we have one of the youngest populations in the world. We have a vastly digital population. And at the same time, we also have complex border tensions. So we cannot ignore the fact that deterrence is not the only thing that is going to be enough. In terms of our national security, it is time to step up our deterrence to also include the regulation, resilience, and preparedness across all of these technological, civil, and geopolitical domains. Thank you.
I think you've adequately brought out the one of the central lessons of the Ukraine war, which had to do with drones. So besides, this is the cutting edge. This happens to be the cutting edge. Amongst the other things being used now are fiber optic cables, also lasers to avoid jamming. So it's a very intense electronic battlefield, and the role of AI is something which is emerging, not quite there as yet. So now we'll have our second speaker, Tejas Bharadwaj, who will speak to us on space tech aspects and how secure they have been in usage.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Manoj Joshi, for organizing this, and also thanks to Dr. Giri for inviting me for this, and also Ms. Suna.
15 minutes.
I'll thank everyone too on that. But also it was very kind of insightful as to Ms. Sinha to lay out what hybrid warfare, the entire situation looks like. My focus will be here on commercial space technologies, and even before that, to focus on what the legal regime in space looks like, because the entire aspect of hybrid warfare at the end of the day falls down to norms and the legality of these actions. Right. If you see the international legal regime, ultimately it falls down to a very kind of a Magna Carta that we have in outer space. It's called as the Outer Space Treaty, drafted by the Cold War powers with UK in hand in 1967. Right. This is exactly the fundamental base that kind of governs space activities in outer space. And a lot of countries have ratified it. For example, if you see 115 countries have ratified it. There are some countries which have disturbingly not ratified it. For example, Djibouti, which is not ratified it. It's in Horn of Africa. And there are also facts to say that China is partnering with Djibouti to kind of launch satellites from there. That is kind of a legal gray zone area as to if you don't ratify a treaty and kind of launch, what will be the impact. But again, I would say that the Outer Space Treaty, since it's launched by 115, I mean, if it's ratified by 115 countries, it kind of results to customary international law just because it has wide state practice and also opinion juris. That is, countries in view of the state practice have passed laws that kind of validate their ratification to this particular treaty. Right. Under Outer Space Treaty, how hybrid warfare is kind of covered is, first you need to understand the different facets of the treaty. Right. So if you see Article 8 of the Outer Space Treaty, it basically offers a right of the registering state of the space object to retain jurisdiction and control over such space object. So if you're launching a state, you'll be called as a launching state. But to the extent of if you go ahead and register the particular space object, you'll be called as a registering state. Which means the state that registers the space object will have the right to retain jurisdiction and control. Which means any state party, right, if it disrupts his right of that particular registering party to kind of retain jurisdiction control, if disrupts it, then that will amount to a violation of Article 8 of the Outer Space Treaty. Right, that's very clear. Right, and moving on, Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty prevents harmful interference on space activities of another country. So, for example, if you do spoofing, if you do jamming, or if you do rendezvous or proximity operations of another space objects, it amounts to harmful interference. Right now, there's an entire discussion that's going on at the UN and other multilateral settings as to what harmful interference constitutes, to the extent that even now they're looking at the light interferences that the satellite constellations cause and astronomy as harmful interference. Right. So there's a various debate, but at the foundation level, harmful interference can be regarded as anything that prevents a particular launching state from intending to do what it meant to do with its space object. Right. That is harmful interference. Right. And one of the most important articles under Outer Space Treaty is Article 6. It basically holds state parties internationally responsible for their national space activities, whether carried by a state or a non-state actor. So, for example, if you are there, right, you have a country, you have a private space ecosystem. If tomorrow a private space company launches a satellite from India, right, India will be held liable regardless of whether it has licensed it or has had continuously supervised it, right. Article 6 even goes on to the extent to say that you need to ensure continuous supervision and authorization of a particular space activity, right, which means you are obliged to do this, right. So to this extent, if you see countries that have ratified Outer Space Treaty, they have come up with their own respective bodies and regulatory bodies to kind of authorize and supervise activities that they do. For example, US has this commercial space transportation office that performs licensing. China has this state administration for science, technology and industry for national defense, and India recently, you would be aware, as InSpace, this Indian National Space Authorization Promotion Authorization Center that kind of authorizes private and governmental activities that are space activities that are happening from India. So it is clearly mentioned that if you kind of do any kind of hybrid activities, you will be held liable under international law. The problem here is with attribution, right? That is exactly where the problem is, right? If you see attribution, despite having an international as well as domestic framework, these gray zone activities tend to deny the rationale for kind of attributing it. So we need to kind of work on capacities to build on attribution. at the same time bolster capacities. So how can we do that? We need to have a common understanding on what are the kind of activities that are allowed, what are the kind of activities that are not allowed. Because as I said, if you see the Outer Space Treaty, the rights and duties kind of embarked or kind of, envisioned on the Outer Space Treaty are very broad. So you still have a little vagueness as to what kind of activities are allowed and what kind of activities are not. And Outer Space Treaty was also drafted in 1967, which means if you see the current activities that are happening, they are very well ahead or very, very well beyond what was envisioned under the Outer Space Treaty. So we need to definitely build capacities and capabilities and also use the existing multilateral platforms to build common understandings, right? So for example, ma'am here mentioned about cyber attacks that happened during Russia-Ukraine war. One of the notable attacks that happened was the attack of the Viasat, right? The K-band satellite internet connectivity system that Viasat was offering was basically cyber attacked, which resulted in denial of satellite internet communication services to Ukraine. And it also had spillover to other European partners. So what did UK, EU, Canada, Australia, US formally do is they came out saying that they kind of technically attributed the attack to Russia. And they kind of came out with a joint statement to say that the Viasat hack was conducted by Russia, right? If you look this at an Indian level, so far India has not come out with any state attribution yet for any of the cyber attacks. If you see the certain reports, they say that the certain reports, the Computer Emergency Response Team, that's operating in India, they prepare reports every year. The reports that's sent only say that the attacks are emanating from certain countries. They have never said that China connected a particular attack, Russia connected a particular attack, or North Korea connected a particular attack, or Pakistan connected a particular attack. So we need to have a change in approach because India's interest at an international level, even in terms of space, is expanding, right? We have currently private space companies offering ground station as a service. Ground station is a point of vulnerability through which you can access and kind of disrupt a satellite, right? So if we're having a growing industrial interest, we need to also ensure that these interests are protected, these economic interests are protected, right? Insurance cost, right? If you're having a lot of hybrid warfare activities on space activities, the insurance cost for even launch, right, or meeting the liabilities associated with space will grow on, right? That's an operational cost for a satellite operator, right? So we have a lot of these impacts that are caused because of hybrid warfare. We definitely need to work on the attribution bit, for which we need common understanding with partners and also develop capabilities. The aspect of space domain awareness, I'm sure everyone here knows about what space domain awareness is the ability of a country to detect and characterize a space object, to see what kind of activities it is doing. This definition of space domain awareness should go beyond space into cyber. What is happening in the cyber domain? In fact, it should even go to the extent of tracking the supply chain vulnerabilities. As to, for example, if you're taking chips, if you see the Indian space industry right now, we still have a lot of chips that we are kind of importing from China, right, which is going into our satellite equipments. And the Salt Tycoon attack that happened, where backdoors were used in supply chains of hardwares. So tomorrow there can be a backdoor that can be implemented in satellites that can be exploited by our adversaries. So we need to have a whole of a value chain, supply chain kind of an approach where space domain awareness also deals with this issue, right? And secondly, critical infrastructure. For India, it is also important to acknowledge satellite as a critical infrastructure under the mandate of NCIIPC. NCIIPC, to expand, is a National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, right? If you see the Union government, under Section 70 of the IT Act, basically has listed all the critical infrastructures that comes under the mandate of NCIIPC. Unfortunately, I have gone through this list. So far, the computer resources of any of the satellite operators or even of ISRO is not mentioned, right? So that approach needs to change. We definitely need to allocate more state capacity and resources. We need to bring in NCIIPC into this to protect our satellite infrastructure, right? And if you talk about my earlier point on developing common understandings, right, we should definitely use the multilateral engagements that are ongoing. For example, for many years at the Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, we have had a fair understanding on what are all the norms that are there for safety and sustainability. In fact, the Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space in 2019 even came out with the guidelines on long-term sustainability of outer space activities, basically to perform activities in a sustainable way, space activities in a sustainable way, perform collision avoidance maneuver, reach out to states, give them a launch notification, give them a safe liftoff time, monitor the re-entry of space objects, right? So all these things were envisioned. So the Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space still is a very effective multilateral platform that states can, use to bring in this issue of hybrid warfare, right? I'm not saying you need to name and shame a country, but you can bring this in a way that's kind of amenable, because the problem is there's also another debate that's happening in Geneva. So the COPAS is in Vienna. Now, another debate that's happening in Geneva is on the Conference on Disarmament. Right now, we have an open-ended working group on prevention of arms race in all its aspects. It's a multilateral dialogue that's happening right now that's focusing on various space security threats. And in the past platforms as well, people have brought in this aspect of monitoring non-state actors' activities in outer space. And it's a very political kind of a platform. You need consensus of all parties to kind of come out with a mandate or with some kind of a resolution. And even if one party kind of not agrees to it, then the entire agenda or entire consensus will collapse. So we need to start using these platforms and make it an issue of space safety and sustainability. Space security, if you securitize a particular dialogue, there'll be obviously reluctance, and there'll be a lot of reluctance to share information and share situational informations. But if you bring it in the aspect of space safety and sustainability, because space, as you know, is a common platform, right? We have 2 or 3 parties operating satellites, and if the satellites are going to get hijacked, they're going to pose a threat to a satellite of another country, regardless of whether they're adversaries or not. So we need to focus more on the aspect of how hybrid warfare can affect the space sustainability and space safety aspect, rather than making it purely a space security aspect, right? And if you see, with regards to building capacities, if you see, India is collaborating with a lot of partners right now. With US, in terms of supply chain, India is going to create a fab that's going to manufacture chips specifically for the US Space Force. So basically, India is manufacturing chips that will be used by the US Space Force, and in time it can also be used for its own domestic consumptions. So partnerships like that, building joint products like under Indus-X initiative, where they can collaborate with common cyber security products for satellites, or for basically having capabilities to kind of prevent jamming of particular satellites, that can be worked on. So leveraging the existing tech partnerships with trusted partners is also one thing that India can focus on in this aspect. So we have I have a different kind of points here that I can bring in my session later on, but I would like to kind of give my floor to the moderator here. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think you've brought out the essential dilemma of dealing with this subject, because it's a question of attribution. Meaning, it's like when these undersea cables are cut. So sometimes you find a ship which is a commercial ship. So now whether the ship has done it by accident or whether it has been done deliberately becomes difficult to tell. The same thing, I guess, happens with space assets, in the sense, if your satellite collides with another satellite, you've done it accidentally or done it otherwise. So, and of course, famously, when it comes to cyber, attribution becomes extremely difficult. To actually pin down, maybe countries like the United States, who have very advanced space domain awareness, can do that. Very few countries have that kind of capability, of knowing each object. Each object is tracked in the United States, including debris. But that's not something which everyone can do. So this is an important issue. I'm glad that you have flagged it. So now we'll have Professor Jegannathan, who's from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. And I must say that I've been remiss. I have not identified you as someone coming from the Carnegie Endowment, Carnegie International, and Dr. Sinha from the Vivekananda International Foundation. And Dr. Jegannathan is from my old university, JNU. So, Dr. Jegannathan.
I would like to thank Chaitanya and the chair, moderator. Just straight away to the question about the how India see this the proxies and the state sponsors proxies and terrorist groups using or getting access to the globally available technologies, emerging technologies, or even the commercial satellite based services. I personally, my observation is that this is a sort of an a critical asymmetric threat to India's national security. I would like to just to share my own observation as also my experience. We discussed about this hybrid warfare. I was in Jammu and Kashmir for 10 years, serving in the Central University of Jammu, a Department of National Security Studies, from 2013 to 2023, where I had seen it's a 10 years of more eventful years, I would say, a lot of developments at the security realm. So it's a sort of a blend of my own observation, my own interaction, my own personal experience I would say this hybrid warfare. The term became popular. I don't know about this rest of the world, but in Indian strategic the discourse became popular only the post 2016 the Burhan Wani incident happened, followed by the surgical strike. Burhan Wani episode is I would say in Indian case, this is my observation. You may have a different opinion about that, but in my case, it's a classic example of how the security the problem. I don't call it as a terrorist problem in Jammu and Kashmir. Have become a sort of a hybrid warfare. And for our security forces, it was a big challenge, and it's sort of a new phenomena. Trying to grapple with it. Only the post Burhan Wani, when things started panning out, and then we'll able to see the broader picture of the larger picture of this the hybrid warfare being launched by our next door neighbor. There are two important things development happened in 2013, and it has an international sort of network where I would say the two prominent terrorist groups, designated terrorist groups. One is Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. The basic difference is Lashkar-e-Taiba is actually it is supported by ISI. Everybody knows, whereas and totally rely on the ISI support and the cadres from the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir, and the Punjab. These belt, the bordering areas belt, and they do run a charity organizations. So this is more of a sort of I would say it's 100% Pakistan state-sponsored group. Whereas the Jaish-e-Mohammed, it has a sort of a transnational terrorist network with the Haqqani network and Taliban. However, they rely on the local recruits in Kashmir, exploiting their own the anti-India from the youngsters sentiments. So what happened in the 2013 and 14 phenomena, this is my observation, they find it difficult to recruit the local youths into these missions. This is a post-13-14 scenario. And that is where we had almost 6-7 years of, I would say, the relative thaw on the border. There is no major incidents happened along the border, and we had sort of a border trade, the LOC, so-called the LOC trade with Pakistan. So the first time when we saw the Burhan Wani, he never engaged in any sort of direct operation or combat with any of the armed forces. He was very popular in the Facebook. He was a poster boy of terrorists, and having every time he shares his pictures with our camouflage. So he's very popular among the youth. That's how he got this. That's the sort of a tactics to recruit for using the social media to recruit the youths into the sort of the missions, the terrorist accidents. The second incident, the second development, when it comes to the cross-border terrorism, when we started learning the cross-border terrorism, the post 2014, there are a lot of series of actions happened along the borders, ceasefire violations, in major ceasefire violations in 2013, and especially in the international borders. And not along the LOCs. Jammu Kashmir, all of you know very well. The international borders, particularly the stretching from the Gurdaspur to the Araspura in Jammu and Gurdaspur in Punjab. This is one of the most critical stretch, even though it is an international border. We call it as international border, whereas the other side they call it as a working border. But it is heavily fenced. But the how, then the question comes, the lot of intrusion happened through this stretch. This is sort of puzzling, and it's guarded by BSF, unlike the LOC where the army guards the borders along the LOCs. One of the interesting thing is the tunnels that they have used. It's a sort of a new thing that they have used in these stretches and for the intrusion and push these terrorist groups into it. And some of them, these tunnels, I personally visited some of the tunnels in the Samba sector with the help of BSF just to see how it operates. In 2018 as well, and there are a lot of, we don't know how many tunnels are there exactly, and it is very difficult to detect these tunnels given the nature of the terrain. The terrain is, most of them are very fertile, rice and wheat growing fields. The local villages, they work there. The soil, it's a sort of a clay soil. It is it's very useful to dig the tunnel. So I thought at that time, we had just to team of the study, understand that why the terrorists, they choose this particular stretch to do it. So we had a group of DRDO scientists also visited from Delhi. So we saw where else these such groups are using the tunnels. The Hamas is the one who actually invented, or I would say innovated this tunnel things, and they studied this the soil and stuff, and they used the non-metal stuff which is commonly used for agriculture purposes to dig these tunnels, and takes a lot of time and efforts. Some of the tunnels are 20 to 30 feet depth, then it can go across 300 to 400 meters. And if you see from Indian side to the other side of the international border, you could see a lot of green foliages, dense sort of a lot of trees they have planted over the last 20 years. So it's very difficult to even our cameras or to detect what sort of activities they are doing. It looks like they are doing the farming activities closely if you look at it. So the tunnels are very important component of pushing this intrusion into the Jammu and Kashmir. This is adopted by the LET, supported by the Pakistan Army establishment. In post 2016, the surgical strike. What happened is surgical strike is that most of these groups were being relocated to interior places, but they introduced this idea of this quadcopters. This we saw the impact. We have this tendency, unless until we have any cases to prove they are using it, we will not confirm that they have been using this. But whereas they've been using this to drop drugs. So in 2020, in 18-19 onwards, they using these quadcopters to drop not only the drugs into the Gurdaspur or these belts, but also use these quadcopters to drop the weapons, grenades. So 2019, there was a grenade attack in Jammu station. Jammu is a peaceful place. Jammu city bus stand. And then they traced that how could the grenades come into Jammu city. And the only route is through RSPURA. So the drones, they were identified as drones, some objects, quadcopters, which is, it can fly beneath your radar and at the level of your fencing, maybe, 12, 13, 14 feet. It could easily cross across the field. And in here side, especially in the month of monsoon time, you could see a lot of the Congress grass, it's a well-grown grass. It's very difficult. So there is a very well-coordinated effort. There are OGs, overgrown workers, to coordinate this. The first time when they used the drones to demonstrate their capabilities, these terrorist groups, they can target some military targets and make an impact, is the 2021 Jammu Air Force Station attack, where the drone exactly came. It is very close to 1 kilometer from, not even 1 kilometer, 500 meters from the airport, which is a military. Even after 6 o'clock, the Jammu airport turns to be a military airport. All of our assets were there. So it just exactly they dropped in the station, particularly pinpointed they dropped that some explosives over it. So for the first time, that's a wake-up call for us to understand how these groups have embraced these emerging technologies. And the copter came and dropped and went back undetected. This is the first case that we witnessed. Now, looking back at the other side, what exactly happening the post 2016 when they moved out of these relocated terrorist groups? These groups have started using these tactics. Perhaps they have learned from the Hamas. We knew Hamas using these sort of drone attacks only after the Gaza attack. So we have seen in October last year that we had seen that. But much before that, The Hamas used to target the Israeli post. We were not aware of it. We don't follow it because it's not a major, large-scale attack, but it's all a selective attack on the border post, especially the Hamas. They were using these quadcopters, and they sort of improvise it to load the explosives. It's not an experiment. So recently, the LET, they have opened a drone training camp, and they have successfully experimented at dropping a human of 70 kilo, a human being, through a drone. 900 meters, the drone went and dropped this guy in a small water pond, and the drone went back. So this is a very important, very interesting, and a more alarming development that happened. The LET had acquired the technology which we thought that these groups may not be able to embrace into such technologies. I'll point out this how our side, what are the efforts that we have taken. It's not like that we are not aware of it. We are very well aware of this. Most of the drones, like if you see the statistics from 2021, you could see the steady rise of these number of drone attacks or drone intrusions into Punjab to Jammu region. Not only these quadcopters dropping the drugs, but also the weapons and arms and ammunitions. So the terrorists enter through the tunnel with the bare hands, and then subsequently the arms, grenades, cash, whatever it is required, including the satellite phones, iridium phones. That was the first time that the South Kashmir, they found the terrorist groups way back in 90s. I think sir must be aware of it if you're following it. The satellite phones they have used, now they are using a lot of the latest advanced, even VSAT technologies from both the sides. So the terrorists just enter into the Hiranagar, that's a border area, and they can highway, they can take any public transport, and they reach wherever the destination. And there is another guy who will collect those items dropped from the drone, and he will be handing over to him. This is a tactics, and that's how the terrorists being pushed into the Jammu and Kashmir. So the 21 to 20, even till now, the number of attacks have been, it's been increasing, it's been growing. And we had a lot of drones being shot down from our side. In fact, I visited one place in Samba where's the border security post. They kept one big iron pillar, sort of like a flag post, and they kept one AK-40, the LNG, hung on kept it on that. So if any objects in the night, the sentry would look at the sky. If he find any objects comes, then he have to pull that bell. Then the one person is on duty, he will come and take out this LNG and he just fire. And this is anti-drone tactics. This I am talking about in 2022. So the two lacuna that time, but now I think we are DRDO and our scientific community have developed it. One is we did not have at that time the tunnel detecting system. In fact, they've tried to get this system from DRDO from Bangalore. I don't know what is happening now, but this is the biggest menace. The tunnel, one is beneath the surface, then there's the drone. It's another biggest mess. What if tomorrow, if these things been dropped? Now, where do they get the drones? Are they actually, getting the support from the Pakistan government? See, these technologies, especially these quadcopters or drones, is a cost-effective and commercially available. In fact, in 2021, Pakistan, the Imran Khan government tried to bring out the drone policies, but he could not get it. There are a lot of tremendous pressure, so he could not get it. So I checked in this. There is one trade data, export-import data website, especially on dealing with such technologies. So I extracted the data from that, extrapolated data. It shows that from 2022 to 2024, there were more than 160 importers from Pakistan. And there are three major companies which actually import drones from three countries. The first and foremost is China. And remember this 2021, which I mentioned about this Jammu airport attack, which happened in 2021 July, around June, and Galwan happened in April. We all aware of it. So the commercial drone from the Chinese companies, where these companies, three companies, major exported to Pakistan, China, then to Turkey, then Hong Kong. There is a company called Sapphire Farm Services Private Limited. This Sapphire Farm Services Private Limited, which is located exactly close to the international border in the Punjab province, the other side of the Punjab province. There's other one, the Sisware Private Limited, which is the largest importer of drones for commercial reasons. where they have received almost 19% of the total the drones that Pakistan imported, which is also located near Rajasthan border. So Rajasthan border, we do face, if you ask any BSF guy, the data is very available, easily available. The important thing is, there is another agency called VEX, Wings Express. It is called VEX. This is located in Karachi, where I would say, yes, just 2 minutes. I would say this is a sort of a receiving agent which procure the large scale these commercial copters and drones. And even the Turkey also supplying these drones to these agencies. The last, I would like to conclude saying that in the month of February this year, there is a meeting, a multilateral, I would say the multilateral or minilateral meeting with all the terrorist groups like LET, Jaish-e-Mohammed, in the Pakistan occupied Jammu Kashmir. The chief guest was from the Hamas representative to Iran. So he attended this meeting. He was all the way brought from outside to here to chair the meeting. I don't know what went there and what we don't know what happened there. But this is a very important meeting that we all observed in Indian establishment, observing with a very serious concern. Why? Because the Hamas is the innovator of such tactics, and these two LET and the other groups, fringe element, now tying up with the Hamas, it is a sort of a dangerous development. And in the years to come, I think it will be more, it will complicate more our border security as well as the security along the India's border. I stop here.
You've given us a good overview of how drones are being used on the India-Pakistan border in Kashmir. I have written a book on the first decade of the rebellion, 1990 to 1999, which is called Lost Rebellion. So, which has seen very big shift in technology, meaning starting with simple radio sets and frequency hopping radio sets. We have come to this. The important part I'd like to emphasize is that in Kashmir, one of the very important, particularly these days, because right now, compared to what it was in the past, the flow of people and weapons is very minimal. It has reduced dramatically. And it has reduced because of the Indian Army cordon, the technologies that are used to block the terrorists from entering, as well as from the periodic ceasefires on the line of control, because when there's a ceasefire, bombardment was used by Pakistan to infiltrate people. So when there's a ceasefire, the chances of their infiltration is down. So there's the number of people coming and the number of weapons coming has reduced dramatically. But it's also very lethal, meaning to try to get across for a Pakistani terrorist is not very easy. But what they've been using from our point of view is this sophisticated technology of PNT, meaning guidance, as well as using communication technology. Many of these groups that are currently operating, for example, in Katwa and some of these areas and the Pir Panjal, it's very difficult to figure out what they are using for communication, because they are not using traditional methods. They're obviously using some form of space-based technology or riding off the internet of local overground workers. That's possible. The second, of course, is the question of drones. Incidentally, Pakistan is probably more advanced than India on the drone front. Our DRDO has been a big disappointment. The DRDO has not provided our armed forces with a single drone which is operational. Everything is imported. And so I hope they do a better job when it comes to counter-drone technology. So finally, we have Dr. Chaitanya Giri, who's my colleague from Mumbai. So he'll speak to us. Chaitanya, 15 minutes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshi. I'll quickly take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining us, good speakers, the good audience that has gathered here. Sorry, I couldn't be there in the Delhi office, but I'm really indebted. And you've already heard really good, precious nuggets of knowledge from the past four speakers. And what more to add than I thought of tracking down some of the global phenomena. Dr. Sinha spoke about Ukraine. I'll speak about some countries that we usually don't talk about. And I'll start with West Africa. A few years ago, sometime around 2020, 21, it came to the fore that the Islamic State operating in West Africa, particularly in the countries of Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Chad, it came across that this Islamic State is using uh, satellite-based Wi-Fi services for long-distance communications. And when intelligence agencies dug deeper, they found out that the Islamic State in the Western African provinces was talking to their counterparts in Afghanistan and as well as in Philippines, as far as Philippines. So, what kind of communication, what kind of coordination is happening is left only to our amazement and wonderment and analysis. But what was very clear that space-based Wi-Fi services are being used, uh, uh, including in zones which can be considered as last miles. So deep in the forest, deep in the desert regions, and deep in regions where it is really difficult to have any terrestrial networks. This was made possible because of certain operators who have been unable to regulate the SATCOM satellite phone services. Then later on, it also became clear that of these four countries, Chad was not allowing uh, satellite telephones for a very long time. And despite that fact, you had satellite phones getting proliferated in that region. So that kind of a security threat also exists here in India, despite the fact that we have also uh, sort of had a prohibition of satellite phones for many, many years. But irrespective of that, you come across some random tourists coming into Kerala, coming into the Himachal Pradesh region, coming out with satellite phones, which are not allowed here to be operated here in India. We've just allowed, uh, one of the four companies, I won't name the company, but one of the four companies to be operational in our territory. Uh, Dr. Joshi, Professor Jegannathan spoke about Kashmir, and it has come to the fore that there is one Pakistani government company known as Special Communications Organization, SCO, which is a telecom company, which is run by an ISI official. And what they've done is they've come up with a cocktail of really highly encrypted YSMS services, which involves pairing of smartphones with very high frequency radio sets. And this particular cocktail of technology gives you access uh, even in zones where terrestrial networks are not possible or wherever signals are down. And again, in this case, the same satellite phone company has been found to be operational as the one which we found out in Africa, in Western Africa. And they have also been able to, this Pakistani company has also been able to ensure some secure communications in regions of low internet connectivity on our side, which is in direct violation of Article 45 of the International Telecommunications Union. So, but do we follow it up? Not sure. And do we follow it up at a I2U level in the International Telecommunications Union? I'm not sure about that. Then coming to another country in Africa, which is Mali. So very recently, Mali is very much affected by terrorism. It has been so for a very long time. And then there are multiple players operating in that zones. As Dr. Sinha pointed out, there are quite a few mercenary forces operating in that geography. So in March 2024, just last year, the Malian government was in news because it had banned Starlink from selling direct to customer kits. And the concern expressed by the Malian government was that it would be misused by armed factions and terrorist groups that are operating in multiple numbers in that particular country, especially those who are affiliated with Al Qaeda and Islamic State. But six months down the line, Malian government resumed the sales of Starlink kits. Now, what changed in those 6 months is not known. Similarly, Kazakhstan government allowed Starlink to come in from the purview that Kazakhstan is a vast country. It has several schools that are located in really remote regions, and these educational schools for kids needed some kind of last mile connectivity solutions. So Starlink came in. They offered kits to nearly 2,400 Kazakh schools, and later on, the Kazakh government found out that, look, this is actually detrimental. We should be wary of this particular development. Let's pull out. So they informed Starlink that we want to terminate these services. Again, the same thing. Within 6 months, the Kazakh government relapsed its earlier, cancellation, and they have given again a period of 6 months of, sales analytics to see whether there are any wrongdoings happening when it comes to sales or smuggling of such kits. Uh, Again, some 3 4 years ago, this one very popular Pakistani YouTuber who is very much like our technical Guruji, who does a lot of analysis of kits, mobile kits and other gadgets. So he was showing in his Pakistani home a Starlink kit that he had procured from somewhere. God knows where had he procured from, because Starlink even today is not operational in Pakistan. Although the Pakistani Telecom Authority is interested, but the sales haven't yet kickstarted. Now the question arises is, uh, how did this person convince the Pakistani customs while transporting that particular kit from wherever he got? If he had got it in person or if he had imported it from somewhere. And aren't there any checks and balances? And if there aren't any checks and balances, then one needs to be really careful about the number of kits that could proliferate. The conflict in Ukraine that Dr. Sinha spoke of has led to supplies of nearly 25,000 Starlink kits in Ukraine, which were given for humanitarian purposes by Starlink, as they say so. But eventually, it was found out that a lot of these kits got smuggled in various conflict territories, including as far as Sudan, which is nothing closer to Ukraine. So in such situations, one need to be really careful about proliferation of kits that are happening. Although many countries, including ours, we have not yet operationalized these services. And the company also, in that case, is claiming that, look, the services, the signal beams are not right now being transmitted over your jurisdiction. But the fact that you have now Starlink company offering its services in Bangladesh, in Bhutan, in Nepal, in the Indian Ocean region, it really raises eyebrows from the purview that, are these governments vetting the sales? Is there any sort of KYC being implemented? And if not, then we must be rest assured that the early bird users of any Starlink kit are non-state actors. In our case, just last year in December, we found out that the People's Liberation Army in Manipur, which is the armed faction which has a headquarters in Sylhet in Bangladesh, they had procured a Starlink kit, and it was found out by our forces in Manipur. And that also shows the extent of smuggling, the extent of proliferation of these technologies. Later on, we found out kits floating around in smuggling boats that are rowing around the Andaman Sea. And it was not just uh, the Starlink kit, but it was also a lot of contraband material that was caught on that particular ship by our security forces at high seas. So a lot of complications are currently arising. There is no consensus right now globally about how to deal with this particular, technological problem that is aiding hybrid warfare. And more or less, there needs to be some sort of understanding about how to go about in preventing such proliferation. One thing that I think of Just a couple of weeks ago here in Mumbai, there was a major FATF meeting, one of the very first meetings that happened outside Europe, outside at FATF's home in Vienna. And when I got to interact with some of our Ministry of Finance staff, I told them that, look, you could be the persons who could be driving this apart from Ministry of Defense, because FATF and especially our financial intelligence units are in charge of preventing a lot of contraband transport, especially from the Golden Triangle region in the Southeast Asia towards the West. So you could come up with some regulatory recommendations to the FATF, where the FATF can compel countries to prevent use of any SATCOM phone or external unit that could be found in the use of smuggling of, let's say, animals, let's say flesh trade or even drug trade. Because these kind of technologies will be used by not only proxies, but also non-state players engaging in terrorism, as well as in engaging in activities that aid terror financing. So there are a lot of labyrinthous issues here, and it is not as simple as it looks. And I'm glad that we are having this conversation today. Thank you.
Chaitanya, I think it's important to Starlink, of course, is the big issue which confronts everyone. And I don't think we can turn our back on the technology and say that, we want this restriction, that restriction. Don't forget that the Chinese are setting up several constellations. The Tianfan, the Guowang constellations are also being set up by the Chinese. And so that is technology is something which you can't simply stop like that, which our tendency often is to see that we can place restrictions, etc. We don't know what the nature of these technologies. Today you have a Starlink terminal which may be about that big, but you may soon have another terminal which is just about fist size. So this is something which we have to look at, deal with it in a more sophisticated and intelligence fashion. So now we've had our 4 speakers. I'm going to throw this open to the audience here. We have about 20 minutes, which we can have a discussion. So please, any questions?
Major Nitu, how can the Starlink kit may amplify or shorten the gray zone area? Amplify kit, Starlink kits in magnifying or condensing the gray zone areas with respect to the security.
Yeah. So Chaitanya, give us a response.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give 2 examples here, especially in Ukraine. There is this Ukrainian company known as Adaptis. It works very closely with the Ukrainian armed forces, and it has been able to come up with a kind of technological solutions where earlier some of these user terminals were really non-repairable. And what Adaptis has done is it has found out certain tricks of the trade, and it is now able to repair some of these instruments that have gone kaput. Now, what that does is it allows that particular instrument to remain usable for considerable periods of times, and that ensures that that instrument is used not only in the geography or with its first customer, but it can be used multiple times. Then there is another company, which is Canadian one. It's called Radars. And Radars has come up with a solution known as Eagle Nest Off-Grid. Now, that solution is very simple. It has a drone. It has a drone parking system where the drone comes and settles and charges itself. And that particular parking system is self-powered. It has its own battery pack, and that battery pack can last really long. And at the same time, it is fitted with a SATCOM terminal. Now, imagine drone parking station, which is self-powered, which can operate for very long times, and which is fitted with a SATCOM terminal, you have a very potent solution in place, which makes that particular drone system, let's say it might be used for reconnaissance purposes. It could also be used for attack purposes. And this particular system will make it really easy for the end users to be operational in a zone which does not have power, number one, and also be operational in a zone which is low on its own terrestrial connectivity in that particular region or vicinity. So it has now become very much possible for user terminals to be used in a way that they not only extend the conflict zones, but also geographically, but also temporally, time-wise.
About Ukraine, yeah. About the Starlink issue, I think Dr. Giri has mentioned it quite well. But coming to the second aspect of man's question about how we can actually reduce the gray zone areas, I think since we are talking about hybrid warfare and the fact that gray zone is exactly between state actor and non-state actor, and since we are talking so much about the cyber domain and the technological domain, I think it's very important for the state actor as well to invest equally in these technological sectors. Like Sir mentioned, if we take the example of drones and the example of India not having enough drones. Now, I think the fact that the non-state actor, if it's a terrorist, or if it's any private military company, if there is any non-state actor which has that access to technology, I think that kind of a narrative can be countered in a very productive way in the same domain. It's not like the state actor cannot enter the technological or cyber domain. So I think through more state investment and expenditure on research and development, I think it is equally possible to reduce that gray zone, to be able to cover that bridge between countering the non-state actor through state mechanisms as well. But I think the question about Starlink has been very nicely answered by Dr. Giri. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. I am Akshay Gadum. I handle space sector at Invest India for attracting investment. I have a question for Mr. Tejas. So since outer space treaty has been long pending, the review, and also since now the domain of the military and the civil are integrating in the space as well, and are there any are there any state or at the UN level, or are there any in terms of reviewing the space treaty itself, or are there any changes they are seeing in the space? Yeah.
That was a really nice question. So yeah, I mean, the countries that I mentioned, these two platforms, the Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space in Vienna and the Conference on Disarmament, that basically deals with the prevention of arms race in outer space. Both these committees at the UN level have kind of been interested to review this outer space treaty, because they themselves kind of feel that this treaty has become outdated, one. Secondly, the terminologies that are used in this treaty have also become vague and not sufficient to cover upcoming latest activities like satellite constellations, right? Mini sats, small sats, right? So that process is ongoing, but you need to understand, when the outer space treaty was drafted, there were just two countries that were at the prominence. That was USSR and US, and negotiations and drafting were little easy, right? But right now it's a multipolar world. We have a lot of space actors, and also the mechanism of the working groups or at the committee, right, is such that it's a consensus driven process where all countries need to agree. Even if one country disagrees on a small text of a particular draft, then the entire process will fall down. So we are living in a world where it's becoming increasingly difficult to come out with legal norms, or I would say legally binding instruments. But to kind of circumvent or to kind of address this legal vacuum, the committees have come out with guidelines and principles on a day-to-day basis that have been kind of useful to help us understand the state practice. But also on the gray zone aspects, I think it is important to hold states accountable. We have an international framework that holds state accountable for space activities, disruption to space activities. You just need to put the burden on them and work out on as to how you can make them accountable. there is no way we're going to deal with non-state actors without the states being held accountable for this. Yeah.
Picking up on the issue of accountability, there is an instance which I would like to cite that recently, earlier this year, there were elections in Romania, and then there were instances of Russian cyber attacks and Russian infiltration into the social media campaign that the people in Romania were getting TikToks and Insta reels about a particular candidate and about delegitimizing another candidate, and because of that the elections had to be completely called off. And then later this year in February, I think we all followed the Munich Security Conference, and then there was the US Vice President JD Vance who made a statement about European democracy and human rights, and he spoke something along the lines of, if that cyber attack by an external country is able to delegitimize your democracy, then probably your democracy was not so strong to begin with, right? So I think it's very important to hold the states accountable. So I think this is a good example to go with that.
Yeah, I'm Group Captain Srinivasan. Question to Dr. Sinha. You mentioned that the undersea cables were sabotaged by the Russians. And you also mentioned about a cyber attack. Was it a physical damage or it was a soft kind of sabotage? That is one question. Second question is, you mentioned that the Nord Stream incident was pinpointed to Russia. Has it come out conclusively? Because, I mean, who had sabotaged that Nord Stream pipeline? Has it come out somewhere?
The first question, the attacks on the power companies were completely software attacks. Like I mentioned about the undersea cables, I believe they were soft attacks as well. Coming to the second part of the question, the Nord Stream. Again, like Mr. Tejas mentioned in his presentation, it has been very difficult for countries to pinpoint or shame in terms of international diplomacy and things like that. So you are correct that Russia has not been pinpointed for the Gazprom, although Russia has been pinpointed for the Viasat and the KSAT satellite networks. So that is the whole point about being a gray zone, because you cannot put it as black and white that Russia is responsible, but it is the fact that most of the countries do believe in international diplomacy.
Sir, good afternoon. This is a submission, sir, not a question. I am Anupam Tiwari. I am posted with the Office of Principal Advisor, General Khandare in Ministry of Defense. Now, we have discussed about a whole lot of panoramic topics that we already know: tunnels, drones, sat phones, contraband, cocktails of technology, Starlink, etc. Submission is that how does this complete ecosystem survive? This complete ecosystem survives on finance. Now, when the balloon is up, how does this finance takes place? This finance during Russian-Ukraine war, a whole lot of money has been raised via crypto. Now, how did it raise? It used the blockchain satellites. So there are about peculiar 10 to 12 blockchain satellites which are responsible for transferring these transactions. So whether we have Space Chain, Blockstream, WiseTech, WiseWire, etc., all these blockchain dedicated satellites are there which can do transactions without internet, without any kind of connectivity between the users. While also I would just submit about, we were discussing about this internet sea cables. China last month had come up with a commercial grade 2-kilometer deep sea internet cable cutter. So now, while 1 kilometer is the general depth of internet sea cables, now they have the capability of going down 2 kilometers and cutting it. And that's not just like a simple hack, saw ki jaake kaat diya. When you go down and you see the figures and you see the technology behind, it is absolutely fantabulous. So that was just a submission, not a question. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Saurabh from the University of Delhi. Ma'am, you have talked about the information warfare, psychological warfare, cyber attack. Considering the fact that India is surrounded by the hostile neighbor, and India is increasingly digitalize its governance and the services, so how much vulnerable we are, and where does India stand when it comes to hybrid warfare? Do we have the capability to counter the hybrid warfare? So if you could please throw light on this.
Yeah.
So my question is largely to Mr. Giri. He spoke about Sudan and how Starlink have been reaching conflict zones. And Mr. Tejas also spoke about Article 6 and states being held responsible for state activities. My question is, how does that affect the private agencies and companies that are associated with space-related activities? How do they impact their existence and profitability if the states are regulating and controlling the market?
I am Mohammad Kashir from Aligarh Muslim University. I'm a student of mass communication and journalism and a potential future war journalist, if Almighty will wish. My question to you, ma'am, you talked about IT militia and cyber army. So my question to you is that how is media, and I am focusing the light on broadcasting media, not a social media, is media a part of hyper warfare? And if it is, then how India can mark its superiority in this segment, despite the fact that India doesn't have a tech giant like Insta, Facebook, etc. Thank you.
So the first question about the fact that India is a vastly digital country and how vulnerable are we to cross-border tensions? 100% vulnerable, to be honest, because like I spoke in my presentation, we have, and the reason I mentioned that, I'll come to that in the next point, we have one of the youngest populations. In fact, 65% of our population is under 30 years of age. And we are also vastly digital. We have the largest population. We have a lot of access to resources in terms of accessibility to technology. All of us are on social media. In fact, most of our news these days is coming from social media. And that is the place where mindsets and narratives are getting formed, because we all know the concept of an echo chamber. If we are consuming some kind of content as young people and openly exposed to technology and accessibility to social media, the same kind of narrative keeps coming back to us. And not just because of our accessibility to social media, it is, or technology, that is not just a con, it is definitely a pro as well. Because like I said, counter narratives are also formed in the same domain where attacks are taking place. And because of our complex border tensions, we are equally vulnerable to any kind of cross-border disinformation, any kind of digital subversion, any kind of cyber attack as well. So it is all the more necessary to ramp up our resilience towards our digital infrastructure. And when we talk about China as with respect to our border issues, I think we mostly just refer to ramping up our deterrence towards and military preparedness towards China. But I think because of hybrid warfare and these kind of technologies which are so out there, in China is pretty much ahead of us in terms of technological development, I think it is all the more important to realize our vulnerabilities and take action towards it. And secondly, the question about cyber armies, broadcasting media, and what can be the Indian response towards it. I think not just social media, broadcasting media has also been used in terms of cloning news, in terms of fabricated information and fake news. So I think social media, even though it's more accessible, but broadcasting media also definitely falls under the ambit of some kind of gray zone. It can. And I think better regulation is definitely a good aspect to go towards it. But in addition, I would also like to request Dr. Jegannathan to speak more, because it's more on Indian security and Indian warfare, and I think he's a better expert.
Yeah, so I got a question about Sudan. So it happens so that Sudan, which is right now facing internal strife because of the civil war, ongoing civil war, it was found out that the Rapid Support Forces militia in Sudan was using, again, Starlink terminals, which were provided to them at really steep prices, at very exorbitant rates. And just before the onset of the conflict, the terrestrial networks were pulled down. A similar situation happened in Bangladesh, where last April, before the ouster of Sheikh Hasina happened, a submarine cable which carries data from Singapore to Bangladesh was cut somewhere close to Indonesia in the southern Andaman Sea. And that is where, again, Starlink came in and offered its services. So there is this peculiar kind of a trend where you see submarine cables or terrestrial networks being ousted and suddenly you have someone coming in, including the Chinese, offering SATCOM-based services. So it could be, a damage done at an industrial level just to earn profits. It could be supported by states, where the state, which is interested in the conflict to permeate in that particular geography or achieve a certain political goal, will put in the money in raising that service at exorbitant rates and derive some non-tangible gains at some point later. There is no immediate profit to gain by offering services in conflict zones unless you have a patron to the conflict.
Hello, sir. I'm Vishwa Patel. I'm studying at Miranda House, and my question is to Professor Jegannathan. I have a very simple question that, as Mr. Jegannathan said, that DRDO hasn't come up with any such drone which is operational for critical security purpose. What do you think may be the reason behind that? Because it is very crucial to build resilience in defense sector, and also both the youth researchers and startups are there which are interested in such projects. What are the barriers and concerns?
Hello, audience. Myself, Ashutosh Pratap. I'm a student of international law and diplomacy. Mr. Tejas, you have discussed about the Outer Space Treaty, 1967. I am just having a question that in that era where international law lacks a definition of terrorism, how can the global legal order effectively respond to the emerging security challenges such as cyber warfare, space-based threats, hybrid tactics, and employed by the non-state and grey zones? It's very simple.
I'll have Dr. Giri, I'll have Dr. Sinha, Tejas, and Dr. Jegannathan. Okay, so Dr. Giri, just if you want to make some comments on what has just been asked.
Not exactly on what is being asked, but I'll close my intervention here that there's also need to analyze the sentiment for a certain kind of technology. For instance, internet is something that is very much desirable by youth all over the world. And it is they who now have an insistence that they be offered seamless internet connectivity. And I'm one of them, although I can't qualify as a youth anymore. But internet has become a highly demanded service, and there is a lot of geopolitics being played uh, around that particular demand. And if this demand is met by domestic players, well and good. Here in India, we have the highest digital penetration in the entire world for 5G networks. We have very solid terrestrial networks. We have just raised our 4G networks once again. But if it goes into the hands of external players, then that is where the problem arises. So a lot of strife that you see that we spoke of today was about external players meddling into the communications sovereignty, the telecom sovereignty of certain countries. And where telecom sovereignty is lost, you lose a lot of subsequent battles. Thank you.
So this question that you asked about terrorism not being recognized under Outer Space Treaty, I'll go back to my intervention. I gave you 3 clear articles that talks about this. It doesn't talk about terrorism per se, but it talks about any kind of harmful interference that's kind of a violation under the treaty. That's Article 9. It talks about jurisdiction and control. If any country takes away the right of the operating state to exercise jurisdiction and control over a satellite, that's a violation of Article 8. And importantly, any activity that's being conducted internationally is the launching state and the state of registry that should have international responsibility for it. That's Article 6. So, for example, if there is a non-state actor or a non-government entity that's acting in India, that's doing something, or in Pakistan, country A, country B, in country A it's doing and it's kind of taking away or disrupting the space actors country B, then the country A will be held internationally responsible for it, right? And from there stems the question of liability, right? So that is where I kind of emphasize on attribution, right? We need to have devices and mechanisms so that we can attribute the attack and also understand where can we politically use it, right? And it can also not be a countermeasure where we can do respond to the attack in a similar manner. We can respond it to in a different way through economic coercion or sanctions or something else. But that clear understanding of the law is important, and it's already there under the provisions. We just got to kind of define it and work around our definitions and interpretations. Yeah.
think I've spoken enough, but just to conclude, I would just say that the whole point of my presentation today was to draw your attention to the increasing hybridity of warfare, so that all eyes are on the fact that warfare is going to become hybrid day by day. And there is a commonly known acronym used to describe it called VUCA, VUCA, meaning that hybridity of warfare is volatile, ambiguous, complex and uncertain. So it's all the more important to understand that even though government responds to hybrid warfare, not just in the Russia-Ukraine region, but across the globe, even though it is difficult to define, it is difficult to respond, but it is not impossible. And with better regulation and with better attribution, I think it can be done. So I think the focus should be on that. And I would just like this opportunity to also thank the chair and Dr. Giri for organizing this and inviting me. Thank you.
I think, so you must be, can tell us that we don't have a tunnel detection so far, any equipments. And this, the recently we saw in the news that anti-drone, the guns or tactics, the things, I don't think so, which is going to be ineffective because there are multiple varieties. If you see the quadcopters, some of them are Chinese-made plastics, but not non-metal stuff. Then you have a UAV. So there are a lot of variations out there. So it's still a challenge for the security forces, and some of them now we are going back to our traditional non-technological methods and tactics to for instance, we are training eagles to catch those flying quadcopters. It looks funny, but this is the sort of a workable, practically feasible thing. Regarding the media warfare, I think now we've lot been said about this thing, but when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir, we are very successful in managing the so-called the what do you call this cognitive warfare vis-a-vis the Pakistan, the post-Balakot. There was something, but we have learned a lot from the ISPR, the way they handle in the initial post-Balakot strike. But after that, we have somehow learned a lot of things, and we are successfully able to control this narrative. So now, if you look at this, then the post-Galwan, again vis-a-vis China, the China is far ahead of us in terms of the cognitive warfare vis-a-vis the spreading disinformation, or the way in which we believe in some sort of informations, and some of the slews of measures that we have taken the post-Galwan, like banning of certain apps, the Chinese-made apps. It is also the part of efforts to it's a part of the cognitive warfare, those apps. To conclude, my thing that the non-state actors or the proxies or the state-sponsored proxies, they always they ahead of look for the very cost-effective technologies, the new emerging technologies, like Saurabh talk about the bitcoins, these sort of things. But it's a sort of asymmetric. I said in the beginning, I made a statement, say asymmetric threat. It is a challenge. It's continuing to pose challenge, even these non-state actors, and we have to keep cope up with such challenges and think ahead. In terms of anticipating that, for instance, swarm attacks. We've been discussing about what if tomorrow's swarm attack happens in our border areas. Until we saw in a television how the paragliders attacked the Israeli the beaches. So it's it's ongoing.
Dr. Giri, I think we've had quite a fascinating discussion. The point is, warfare has always been there. Space is another platform. Meaning, just like there have been other platforms, undersea is a platform. These cables get cut, they get repaired very fast. It's no longer that the cable get cut and that's it. They get also repaired very fast. And there's, of course, the alternative of space-based internet available. But we are now reaching the point, not of hybrid warfare, but cognitive warfare. And this is the era where we are living, where truth is a lie and lie is a truth. And this is the manipulation which goes beyond space and which goes beyond everything, which becomes very difficult to combat. But it is a society that we are living in. It is a society which we have to deal with. And just like we deal with other threats, I'm sure we will deal with it, and we will, the human beings will prevail over this. So I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like some applause for our speakers.